See, this is my life. It always will be. There's nothing else. Just us. And the cameras. And those wonderful people out there in the dark.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Out There in the Dark. My name is Tom Alexander, and with me is my esteemed colleague.
Who?
A.Z. Majid.
Wow. You think
Yes.
I'm esteemed?
Esteemed. Well, no, steamed.
I'm steamed.
You're
I am.
steamed, like
I'm mad about things in the world right now. Who isn't steamed? is what I
Yeah,
wanna know.
exactly. I just try to avoid everything.
Yeah, that's going to help.
No, it doesn't help.
Jesus, Tom, get with the program.
Ostrich in the head in the sand. And
I feel like your dad now.
yeah,
You get off that couch. What are you doing in the bathroom all day?
thanks, Marty Feldman.
Yeah.
And today we're going to talk about. So, one of the figures in American independent cinema that's not usually discussed is Roger Corman. Usually, people think about the birth of American independent cinema as figures like John Cassavetes or John Sayles. And really, Roger Corman was, from the late 50s onward, the first significant figure to produce, write, and direct super low budget genre films for the most part, although he did do some personal projects that were more dramatic. And so not only did he birth that movement, he also birthed the careers of a large number of Hollywood auteurs, who went on to really reshape American cinema as we know it.
Yeah, I think, we... That's just Django, everybody. He's part of the show now. Yeah. Roger Corman. So, I mean, I think we were talking a little bit about this. I mean, one of the interesting things during the Oscars this year was, like, there was a lot being made about both Anora and The Brutalist being made for, really low budgets, right? Mm-hmm. And I think there's a bit of a trend towards that, kind of idea now because, budgets have just gotten more and more nuts, whatever. And I guess people are talking about that. But I mean, that plus my own experiences, working with certain people who have kind of adopted a similar model. Like the thing about Roger Corman is, and people, I'm sure most people don't even know who that is anymore, but he was a guy, so we go through a little bit of his history, right? Like he was a guy who basically, the interesting thing about him was if you ever saw him in an interview, he was very straight. He was almost square. I think he played an FBI agent in Silence of the Lambs, right? So he had that kind of very like Midwestern kind of, just straight ahead guy.
Usually a dress shirt.
Yeah,
suit and
just the opposite, type of figure for the kind of movies he became famous for. Right?
Not your hip indie cred.
No,
guy.
Not like a Dennis
A24
Hopper
is not doing any of his films.
Yeah, exactly. He was like not hip, but he was hip, right? It was kind of an interesting dichotomy. And the thing is, he came out of the 50s. Now, I know that he actually was an engineer. He got trained as an engineer, which, means he's an extremely smart guy. But he hated it, and he decided he wanted to go into movies. And he worked at 20th Century Fox, I believe, as like a, basically started in the mailroom kind of guy, right? Yeah. And then he became a story editor. And his story, which is really brilliant, is that, and it really sparks his whole enterprise, is that, so he was given this script to give notes on called The Big Gun. He said, he gave a whole bunch of notes, and then he said, you should change the name of this to The Gunfighter. And the guy took all the credit, apparently, the actual story editor. He was a junior story editor. And, it came out, the movie came out, and he got no credit at all. And he said after that, I'm done with 20th Century. And then he started his own American International movie productions, right?
Yeah.
And... right away, he was the guy, he said, fuck it, I'm just going to do it my own way. and he produced, directed, wrote, edited everything, right? And the thing is, he started this kind of grindhouse, right? This kind of like just churn out as many movies as you can.
You shoot a film in like 3 days.
Yeah,
for like
exactly.
No money, and then just reuse the sets over and over again.
Reuse the sets, reuse the same actors. He developed a real, like a Corman School almost, right? And this is the thing about him that's so legendary. Is that he was the first guy to say, fuck that, I'm not doing it I'm not going to go through the studio system. I don't need them to do this. And he started his own studio, just this guy, right? And everybody who came out of that studio was just brilliant, right? Jack Nicholson and Bruce Dern and Martin Scorsese,
Peter
and Coppola,
Fonda,
Peter Fonda,
John
Dennis
Sayles,
Hopper,
Jonathan Demme,
Peter Bogdanovich,
going on all the way to the 80s, really.
Yeah, even Joe Dante, and like just many, so many.
Joe Dante cut his trailers.
Yeah, he even he did, and Alan Arkush, right? Those two.
I think Joe Dante cut the trailers that Corman was distributing of the foreign language films by Fellini. And
yeah, he was.
He was
that's
cutting
true.
those.
But that's getting
trailers.
a little ahead of the game at
Okay,
this point.
sorry.
But,
Jumping ahead.
Yeah. Anyway, but he was this guy who did that. So he started with this, using his own money, his own everything, and he put together a movie. And I think one of the first movies he did was Bucket of Blood, which was a big hit. Right?
Yeah,
it made money, and he basically understood from that there was an audience for this kind of sort of hip, because it was in this world of teenagers, of like people that were never really kind of spoken to before, right?
Yeah, and when you watch the movie, it takes place mostly in a beatnik coffee shop.
Exactly.
That it makes fun of them. Like it pokes fun at the beatnik thing while still being about the beatnik thing.
Exactly.
And then ripping off House of Wax as, Dick Miller murders people. It's a comedy horror, which is not scary at all.
I'm just like from a kind of sociological point of view. I kind of think of him as kind of this person who really shone a light on an area that big studios would never have thought.
Exactly.
Whatever. He was prescient in that sense because he kind of could see what was happening, even though he himself was not hip. As a character, his politics were very hip. Like he was very left. He was all, against the war. He was with the hippies and all that kind of stuff in the 60s. So his movies reflect a kind of, thing that would later became extremely popularized by people like John Waters and stuff like that, which is, and then of course by Tarantino, right? Like, but that kind of filthy kind of, seedy,
counterculture,
B-film counterculture, drugs, motorcycle gangs. He had famous movies like about motorcycle, like the Wild Angels, it's a very spotty thing because he did like a lot of horror movies and he did a lot of sort of hippie movies, like and sex. There was like this they were sexploitation movies, right? So, but again, you have to remember that was the first time anybody realized that people are actually going to pay money for this and go watch these,
because he
recognized drive-in
stuff,
right?
Yeah, he recognized the market. I mean, and I think that's what Corman was really great at, and why he became a successful distributor in the 1970s, because he recognized a market that was untapped by the competition.
Right.
And I think that's a big measure of his success.
I think so, and I think to a certain extent, I think people were like, he was seen as kind of the business guy, right? But what I love about his whole story is there's always this kind of concept that, there's the business film guy and then there's the artist, right? And those two are not going to get along or whatever. They're just two different types of people. But it all comes together in somebody like Corman, right? He recognized artistic talent. He himself, his favorite movies were foreign films, right? By like Bergman.
He was a cinephile.
He was like a huge Bergman fan. Like his work in many ways didn't reflect who he was, but on another level they did, right? Because actually when you watch them, the one thing about I haven't seen all of them, but we've seen a few, right? Like I've seen quite a few Roger Corman movies, and he's actually a good director.
Yeah.
Like they're better than you would expect them to be, even though they have that kind of cheesy, exploitation premises and
even
all that
the
stuff.
crazy,
Right?
super low budget early films like Bucket of Blood he made, and then after that he shot Little Shop of Horrors in 2 days or something.
Yeah.
On the exact same sets.
Yeah.
And when you watch them, they're a lot of fun. They're very breezy and snappy, and the humor is there. Little Shop of Horrors I've rewatched, and it's super funny.
Well, that's the thing. It became such a huge franchise later, right? But
with the musical.
With the musical and the stage play. But that's the other thing. It's like Little Shop of Horrors, the stage play, was big in the gay community first, right? Because that's the one. That's the thing about Corman. His films are appreciated by a very, very, very sophisticated section of society that understands irony and camp and kitsch and all that stuff, right? And I think on other levels, people just enjoy them because they're like, there are a lot of cars that get crashed up and bashed up and stuff like that. And there's sex in them and stuff. There's a kind of like pandering to the audience thing that we think about that I think he kind of throws water on that, right?
He does.
Yeah.
And even Little Shop of Horrors, it takes place on Skid Row, which in 1960... no Hollywood film was taking place.
Yeah,
on
and
Skid Row.
you have the Jack Nicholson pervert, like the masochist.
And
there's ideas, and they're characters, and they're the kind of sort of left turns that you would expect in an Ed Wood movie.
Yeah,
but they're so much better. They're actually well-made films and funny and smart. Like his premises are smart. Like we talked about another movie. There's one called Last Woman on Earth, which I think is on Tubi, right?
Probably.
It's on one of the streams.
It was released as a double bill with Little Shop of Horrors, which is funny because Last Woman on Earth isn't really a comedy.
No, it's pretty serious,
Pretty
actually.
serious, yeah.
Yeah, and Last Woman on Earth, his premises are always really interesting, right? Like this one is like these two guys and this woman. They go. It reminded me a little bit of Knife in the Water. Because they
mixed
go
with On the Beach.
Yeah, exactly, because they have while they're swimming underwater.
Yeah.
Some nuclear explosion happens, and when they come up from the water, everybody's dead, right? And it's like now there's this kind of like battle between the two guys and the woman and all that kind of stuff. It's very ahead of its time, and it has interesting stuff to say about gender and about women's positioning and objectification and all that stuff, right?
Right. Because she's married to one of the guys who's a real like scumbag, and then the other guy is the scumbag's best friend.
That's
who's
right.
also his lawyer.
Right. Yeah.
Who's played by the film screenwriter Robert Towne.
That's
of
right.
All people.
Who became famous for Chinatown.
Yeah.
Right. And that's the other thing. Like Robert Towne came out of that school too, right? So. But I'm saying like his movies are pretty good. Like he made so many that there are some super duds sure. Like I think I think he made in the end like 350 films.
He didn't necessarily direct all of them.
No,
but
but
he certainly was
an
auteur producer. Yeah,
exactly. And like I saw his wife, Julie Corman, right? They were kind of like this team. Like once he started to distribute films in the 70s, Julie Corman became a producer, and there's a story where they're interviewing Julie and she says, we never know what the other person's working on at all, and it's not okay, right? Like she's like it's terrible because I'm like, the people are always like, what's Roger working on? And she goes, I don't know. So she goes up to him one day and she goes, well, what are you working on right now? And he goes, I'm working on 12 movies. And then she said, and then he started to name them off, and he could only remember 10. So then he canceled the other 2 movies that he couldn't remember. But that's exactly the kind of
very
schedule.
pragmatic.
And he was a notoriously cheap guy too. But yeah, I just think he's like such a fascinating guy because he's so he's not primarily known as a great director, even though he's made some really good movies, right? He never really made a like something amazing, right? Like,
I mean, I have a favorite Corman film, which I think is
Okay.
pretty remarkable. And it's one of the films in his Edgar Allan Poe cycle of horror films that
Right.
he produced and directed, most of which starred Vincent Price.
right.
And they were the first films that he made in color and had much bigger budgets. And those became wildly successful, and he was able to increase the budget with each film. And my personal favorite is The Mask of the Red Death. And it is the one that most reflects his European cinema tastes. It feels very Bergman. It's shot by Nicholas Roeg, and it is this very surreal, strange adaptation of Poe. With Vincent Price is this king in this castle, and the Black Plague is
It's
wreaking havoc. If we ever have another pandemic, it's a great pandemic watch.
Yeah,
Let me-
it's a
let me
great
tell you,
story,
I
and yeah,
really-
you're right.
That's what I
those
rewatched it.
those Poe movies are considered, I think, his best work as a director because they
Yeah.
are a little bit higher budget, and he would take stories like Poe stories, but he would embellish them with his own stuff to make them longer, right?
Yeah. Like something like The Pit and the Pendulum, for example, is another one of my favorites. But the story is just
It's 20 pages
it's
or
20.
whatever. Yeah.
So Corman made up this whole backstory with the Spanish Inquisition, and Vincent Price thinks he's his father torturing people and blah blah blah.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, and Barbara Steele's in it, which is great.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing about him too. There's this always interests me about artists like him because they inhabit both the high and the low, right?
They mix it.
They mix it.
The
like
low
they-
becomes high.
Exactly, and vice versa, right?
Yeah.
That's the thing. It becomes a kind of like dialogue with literature, right? Like this, canonized literature, but from the perspective of the everyday person, almost, right? Like
Yeah.
and from what you would be, he could communicate that to people because they're fun movies to watch,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And they're beautiful.
You don't need
movies,
to
right?
know Edgar Allan Poe or have read, a book in your life.
Yeah,
to Have a
exactly.
great time watching
You don't have
Pit
to
and
know
the
that this
Pendulum.
is like high literature or something, right? But it is, right?
Or the examples we were discussing earlier, the motorcycle movie The Wild Angels, and with Peter Fonda, and then he also made The Trip with Jack Nicholson, which was a psychedelic thing.
Which I think Nicholson wrote that one, right?
I think he did.
Yeah. So because Nicholson wrote a couple of the Corman films, right, and directed.
Did he direct?
I think he directed The Trip as well. Let me see.
No. Corman directed The Trip,
Oh, okay, but screenplay.
but Nicholson wrote it. Yeah.
Okay, so yeah, he did The Trip, which is interesting. He did this movie, The Trip. Jack Nicholson wrote it. This is 1967.
Yeah.
And you're right. Roger Corman directed it, and I remember because he insisted on taking LSD before directing it. Yeah, like it was a big hit.
It was a big hit,
Yeah.
and when you look at like a movie like The Trip or Wild Angels and people like Peter Fonda and Dennis Hopper and Jack Nicholson, what do you get? Easy Rider,
That's right.
which was such a massive hit, critically acclaimed, and really changed Hollywood.
It did. It
you know.
did. Again,
And
it
it
was
forced Hollywood to go from, the big budget type movies like Dr. Dolittle just came out, or like Sound of Music,
yeah,
and focus on what they called then the quote unquote youth market.
right.
And that
Yeah, that's exactly.
created the auteur system we saw after that, from everyone from Scorsese to Spielberg to Cimino, Coppola.
Yeah, you have to remember, like Spielberg's one of his biggest films, right, was Jaws, right? Which I'm wearing the T-shirt of right now.
It's true.
And the thing is, Jaws is a Roger Corman movie. That's exactly the kind of movie Roger Corman would
it
make.
feels and smells like.
It's better. It's got a higher caliber patina to it, or whatever.
But it's based on a junky beach read novel.
Yeah,
right.
Totally, right?
Yeah.
And this is the interesting thing about Corman, right? Because after a certain point, he stops directing, right? I think he just sort of got tired of it, and he starts distributing. And that's when in the 70s he starts New World.
Yep, New World Pictures.
And yeah, that's when he starts basically distributing all these art house cinema films, like he did Cries and Whispers by Bergman.
Yeah, he did.
He did Amarcord, Fellini, right? He did Truffaut, I think, one of the
Yeah, he did Truffaut, Volker Schlondorf, the German filmmaker, like the Tin Drum.
Tin Drum, right? Exactly.
Kurosawa.
Ron, right?
And these are the films that he loved. He
loved them, and it's almost like, he's such a dichotomy as a character, but I love that about him. Like, I love the fact that he was able to kind of give back almost,
yeah,
to the very craft that he loved. He was participating in it in one way, and then he wanted to participate in a more authentic way, I guess, and he
wasn't dumping these into grindhouses and drive-ins, of course. These were films he was playing
although
widely.
Yes, he did. I saw Alan Arkush on an interview say that when he got Amarcord, he had Arkush and Joe Dante cut the trailer,
right?
And they said, "Well, this is different from anything else we ever cut for you. How do you want us to do it?" And he goes, "Exactly the same way." So they made this grindhouse style thing. It was the biggest opening for a Fellini film ever, and
and won Oscars.
And then in the end, they did play them. They did put it in drive-ins.
Amarcord, I could see it in drive-in.
Yeah, but I mean, can you imagine if that was still happening today?
Wow.
That'd be so fucking cool if somebody put art house films in a drive-in. Right?
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, but it's like, there was just this kind of like, these guys were pioneers in this, not just in the sense of the business model, I'm saying, which is smart, because I have friends who do a very similar thing. It's a volume business, just churn it out, know where your niche is, right? If everybody does horror, a lot of horror, if you're Hallmark, you do Hallmark or whatever it is, right? But that all starts with Corman. The problem with Corman and why his sort of style of exploitation films weren't possible for him anymore, and he says this himself, was Star Wars.
Wow.
Right? Because what Star Wars did was it took a Roger Corman style premise, a B film, basically a Buck Rogers style movie.
Well,
right?
it was meant to be like a remake of Flash Gordon.
Gordon, that's it, right? So you do that, but you put it in this kind of big budget, multi-million-dollar area, and it becomes this spectacle that he's not able to reproduce, because the whole point of those movies is they're supposed to be B films, right? Mm-hmm. Now the B film genre has now moved into the A films, and then it becomes event cinema after that, right? Everything is event cinema, and it's all...
Which is Jaws too, right? Jaws is a B
Jaws
movie
was that too,
up.
to a certain extent. He says that too, but I think Jaws is a little grittier still. It still has a little bit of that.
Jaws is very artful, much more artful than Star Wars. But
it is because it's a better filmmaker, right? Like, I mean, Spielberg is definitely a better filmmaker than George Lucas. Yeah. George Lucas is,
Well, I mean,
I don't. The only movie I ever liked by him was American Graffiti.
I like Star Wars. It's got its problems big time, but it's a fun movie. But this is not great filmmaking. And then, of course, they paired up and did Raiders of the Lost Ark, which is another B movie gussied up as
totally, So this is all from the Roger Corman school, but he wasn't able to do it himself because they kind of took it and ran with it, and we're still doing it now.
Yeah,
I mean it's all event stuff. It's like B film exploitationist stuff, right?
Yeah.
So so he had to move into other areas, and I think apparently he tried to do a lot of slasher films for a while, and they didn't quite work out.
He tried to do a Marvel movie in the 80s.
Yeah, he did Fantastic Four, right? Yeah. Wow.
If you watch the clips on YouTube, you have to see it to believe it.
Yeah, it's pretty bad. Yeah, and then I think he, basically, as he got older, he started to get, put in like the movies of his proteges, right? Like he was in Silence of the Lambs. He was
because he helped launch Jonathan Demme. Jonathan Demme directed some of his early.
He did Caged
quickie,
Heat,
like Caged Heat.
Yeah, the prison lesbo films, we called them.
Yeah. And in the 80s, James Cameron did Piranha.
Piranha's good.
It was Piranha 2. I can't remember.
He did one of those, yeah.
And
Joe Dante did Piranha, I think.
And
yes. He might have done Piranha 2,
yeah,
right?
I think you're right.
Yeah.
I think you're right. And to this day, you watch interviews with these guys, and they're all like, we learned everything from Roger Corman.
Yeah. I know. And it's like, really, we should go through a list of everybody we can think of. Let's see.
Well, Ron Howard.
Ron Howard, right. And he did a movie for Corman called Grand Theft Auto, which is really good, actually.
I haven't seen it.
It's really, really good. And then...
the big Francis Ford Coppola.
Yeah.
Right?
Coppola
Dementia 13 was, I think, his first little horror movie for Corman.
Yeah. And then he directed some of the
He
Raven,
wrote
apparently.
a lot, and he also cast Roger Corman. Coppola cast Roger Corman as a senator in The Godfather Part 2.
That's right. He's a senator.
In the hearings
That's
thing,
right. Yeah.
Yeah.
He's so typical. That's what I'm saying. He's so straight.
So he cast him as a senator, and then Jonathan Demme cast him as the head of the FBI.
Exactly. So, he was like so not cool.
I think Corman was involved in Boxcar Bertha, Martin Scorsese's.
Yeah, he produced it.
Yeah. So Peter Bogdanovich.
Yeah.
Roger Corman.
Targets.
Targets.
I think that's the best movie that ever came out of.
I have never seen Targets. I still haven't.
Get
seen
out
it.
of here now.
I know.
Go get it. Go right now and rent it. Targets is great. I saw it a long time ago because I had a friend in high school who was super into movies. Yeah. And he was like, "Oh, you have to see Targets." One of those guys who's like, "How do you know this?" Right? But this is pre-internet. And then I watched it. It's fucking great. It's really, really good.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the thing
Boris Karloff, right?
Yeah, because he had a deal with Boris Karloff that he had to.
He had to do one more.
One more.
Yeah.
And then Bogdanovich took that and built this whole other movie around it, which is brilliant, right? Yeah. It takes place at a drive-in, a lot of it. But that's an interesting thing about something like Targets or Wild Angels. They were issue movies, right? They were stuff that people were simultaneously living through, right? Mm-hmm. They were contemporary that way. That's also something that, like, movies didn't do that.
No, and I think because Corman's films were so low budget and shot so quickly, he could probably tap into a very immediate zeitgeist.
Yeah.
Which these, slow-moving, epic Hollywood behemoth dinosaur movies couldn't possibly do.
They couldn't.
And those films were, of course, trying to appeal to everybody.
Right.
So but Corman was like, here's the niche. This is an issue right now, and we're going to turn it into not a message movie, but, some kind of wild, fun ride.
Yeah.
That touches on this
subject.
And
the style of it is so influential, even on somebody like Greg Araki or something like that, or even like Repo Man. There's that kind of like, it's got a punk aesthetic, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
But this was back in like the 60s, so you just have to absolutely admire his. He said that this is a segue into talking about my favorite movie by him, but he said once that he never lost money on a movie. Mm-hmm. Except one. Mm. And this was a movie he made in, I think, 1962. I can't remember. It's called The Intruder. And it stars a brand new William Shatner, first ever time starring role. And I watched this movie recently. It's really good. It's actually like, okay,
I'll have to seek it out.
Yeah, it's actually like very pressy. It's very relevant to right now, right? Because it's all about a guy like William Shatner who's like a total racist. It takes place contemporaneously again, just after Brown versus the Board of Education, right? And the integration of schools in the South. This guy goes into this town and starts to stir up all kinds of racism and problems, but in this very con man kind of way, very slick way. So it's very like blunt. There's a lot of the N-word in there and all that kind of stuff. but it's a really, really strong movie. And he said he lost money on it, and so he never did another one like that again.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But he was capable of it, and he wanted to do it. And that was the other thing. He was very left-wing, and he was very progressive. And he was, like there were stories about doing The Intruder that they were targeted, right? People knew that they were making this movie, and so they got targeted. They got, like, protested, threatened.
Wow.
So a brave guy, right? Mm-hmm. He was a guy, I think, from a filmmaker's point of view, or anybody who's, like, trying to write or anything like that, he was a guy who the lesson for me from him was, you go and do.
Yeah.
You don't think, you don't overthink, whatever. It's next project, and there's a brilliance to that I think I didn't realize when I was younger.
No, we all thought we were auteurs.
Yeah, we thought we had to, like, take years to write our great, whatever. And it's like, no, man, just keep spitting the shit out. You're gonna hit something, right?
Yeah, it's a real parallel with Cassavetes too, because Cassavetes started making films because he was so disillusioned with acting in these Hollywood films,
right?
And he was just like, well, I'll just act in them to make the money to make my own indie films.
That's right.
And he was the kind that, although his films were certainly not grindhouse whatever,
no,
by any means,
no, quite the opposite.
He played with genre for sure, like in Gloria and Killing of a Chinese Bookie. But I mean, he was grinding them out too. Like, he was shot quickly,
not nearly as much, but yeah, he did.
But he shot quickly, low budget, a lot of improvising, and
yeah. I think the only difference I would say is, like, somebody like Cassavetes has always had this kind of shine to him of artistic merit.
Yeah.
Whereas
Corman
never did. And I think, that's all about perception of the area in which he delves, right? Yeah. Again, trash, right? Trash is always, something that people can easily dismiss. But it's funny, trash is not inherently bad. You know what I mean? Like, you find, like, you could find something great.
One of the great filmmakers to come out of the Roger Corman School was also John Sayles, who wrote Piranha, and,
right,
like,
and then
the
went
sci-fi
on to do
Star Wars ripoff, Battle Beyond the Stars.
Yeah. And what was Sayles' biggest movie, you think? Passion Fish? No,
probably like maybe 8 Men Out.
8 Men Out. I think he had a bigger hit.
Yeah.
Yeah, with Alfred Woodard.
Yeah, maybe Matawan was a big one.
Matawan was kind of big. Secaucus 7 was big.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, all sorts of, like...
My favorite from John Sayles is Brother from Another Planet.
Oh, my God, yeah.
I love that movie.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's very Roger Corman-y film, too.
It really is, yeah. Again, issues, but fun.
Exactly. Fun and again, very much like Repo Man, too. It's like, you got to have some space and you got to have some sci-fi. It's genre mixing. It's genre blending, right? Yeah. And I love that kind of stuff, like genre blending. Jonathan Demme did that too, like, in Something Wild even, right?
Yeah.
Like that's
even
sort of,
Last Woman on Earth is ostensibly like a conceptual sci-fi.
It is.
But
it's also like a
domestic drama.
Yeah, domestic drama and a kind of sociological study, right? Yeah, I think he was good at that because his own personality was so split into, like, doing trash and being high art guy.
Yeah.
Maybe it kind of bled through in his movies that there was a mix of genres going on, even in something as banal as, The Wild Angels or whatever, right?
I mean, is there a parallel today? Like, is there a Roger Corman today? I mean, I don't think so.
I'm trying to think when the last group of that type of gritty kind of just, I
mean, even Tarantino, even early Tarantino was a big
studio
stuff.
production. Yeah. I guess maybe somebody like Hal Hartley,
right,
was kind of like that, but it never sort of took. There was no movement around it.
With
right?
Stillman.
Yeah, like there was
Maybe.
those guys. I'm
Yeah.
not big on Whit Stillman, to be honest, but
Right.
but I know what you mean. Like he's
Yeah.
in that group of
Like they're indie films, but again, they don't play with genre as much.
no, they're sort of like Jim Jarmusch was the
Oh,
best
that's
of that.
yeah. That's a good call there. Yeah.
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 We should do a whole show on Jim Jarmusch.
I'd love to,
Actually, I
yeah.
think he's a complete genius. Anyway, anyway, I mean, that's basically, I guess,
Yeah.
it. I mean, is there anything we forgot to mention about Roger Corman? I'm gonna post something to the documentary, which is called Corman's World, which is a really, really good documentary. I mean, it's not a great documentary. It's just a good.
That's a great.
Good overview,
Subject,
yeah, of it, of
Yeah.
his.
And I guess I could say if you want to check out some key Roger Corman films, I would say, Little Shop of Horrors,
Yep.
Bucket of Blood is a good one.
Okay.
I would go with the Edgar Allan Poe films, namely House of Usher,
Yeah.
Pit and the Pendulum, and Mask of the Red Death.
I would say Intruder.
Yep.
Last Woman on Earth.
Yep.
Definitely those Poe movies. I would say definitely you got to watch The Wild Angels. You got to watch The Trip.
The Trip.
You could, and also The Raven.
I haven't seen The Raven.
The Raven, because you'll enjoy Jack Nicholson in that. And there's one they shot. There's another one. Oh, what's the other one called? Okay, give me 1 second. Oh, he did Death Race 2000 too.
Oh, right.
That was a big one when I was a kid. Everybody loved that one. Okay, so right after The Raven, they shot another movie there because they had the sets, right? So it's the exact same sets.
Right.
And they shot it in like 3 days. I can't remember the name of it now. The Terror. That's what it's called.
Okay.
So I want to see this. I've never seen there's this movie called The Terror. It came out. They basically reshot on the same sets as The Raven. So it's Jack Nicholson and Dick Miller is in it. And it's apparently, it makes no sense at all, right? It's like completely like crazy, but a lot of people say you should watch it because it's like a lot of fun, right? But yeah. Yeah, you can dig deep into Roger Corman.
And the other films
so
we
many,
talked about, he produced like Targets, Boxcar Bertha.
Yep.
Yeah.
I mean, he also produced. Oh man, I mean, so many.
Yeah.
Like, you'll be surprised when you see his name come up on stuff. I think he produced. Of course, I'll never remember now.
We should just get ChatGPT to do our entire podcast at this point.
It's true.
So Rock and Roll High School?
He did produce Rock and Roll High School. That's true. Yeah, Alan Arkush, and he also did. Yeah, it doesn't matter. Okay, you know what? I can't remember because I'm an old man. But you know what? It's worth looking through. Some stuff online. Looking at some interviews with him and watching.
A lot of these movies are free. Like they're
ton of
public
them are
domain.
free. Yeah,
you can
like
watch them on YouTube, Tubi,
absolutely.
whatever.
Yeah. But again, just to for anybody who's out there who's interested in movies and wants to do it, especially these days, it's like you can just churn shit out.
Yeah.
And it's a volume business. Just keep going.
Yeah.
There's two ways of thinking about it. You can sit around and procrastinate. And go like, I'm waiting for my great moment,
Mm-hmm.
Or you can just keep shitting stuff out until you finally shit out the golden egg. Yeah,
totally.
Yeah, that's AZ's, advice to artists.
That's your raison. That's your MO.
Exactly. That's going to be reprinted.
Shitting out shit. That's
exactly. It'll be reprinted after my death, just like Goethe's letter to a young artist, to a young writer.
And I think with that, we'll see you out there in the dark.
Whoops.